Speaking of the best, let's talk about it. Joe Burrow. Okay. The didn't practice to the end of last week thing happens, and people, where's Joe? What's happening? Let's just see what he looks like at minicamp and make sure everything is good and there's nothing to freak out about. OTA, or I guess minicamp, on Tuesday. Burrow's out there, throws. It wasn't, Jay, it wasn't a intense session for Burrow. I mean, he wasn't launching deep balls. He wasn't ripping it. It was pretty easy, but he went through everything. I mean, he did all the things that you would expect him to do. He wasn't sitting out or anything like that, but it wasn't some full throttle deal, which is totally fine. And afterwards, he kind of talked a little bit more, really in the same way I thought that he spoke a month ago about this thing and about the perspective of this offseason, and maybe even a little bit more specifically here. Let's bring you a little bit of Joe Burrow, and then we'll come back and talk about it. So here's about 2.5 minutes of what was about 20 minutes of Joe Burrow talking about this injury and his recovery and his NFL perspective.
It's definitely something I've thought about, yeah. Whenever the injuries start to stack up, it's your football mortality kind of comes into the back of your mind. So that's definitely something that I've thought about and something that I've had to fight through. That's every injury that happens. They stack, and you continue to think about how you can get better from those and how you can come back an improved player when maybe you're not getting the reps that you had because of your injury. So it's always a challenge. It always is. But, I'm built for it. Our team is built for it. And the people that I have surrounded myself with have been through it with me as well. So I'm excited about the season. I'm excited about what we're going to do. And I'm excited about all the guys we have in the locker room.
Does that help get you through the uniqueness of this offseason? Maybe the next 6 weeks being different than past sessions between OTAs and training camp?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to not quite grind as much for this next month and a half. My off season has been about 10 weeks longer than everybody else's, so I've had 10 weeks of work that everybody else hasn't. So I feel really good about where I'm going to be at come training camp.
Joe, you mentioned your familiarity with dealing with the off-season injuries in the last few years. Do you feel that, though, that it hardens you and helps you along the way in the regular season, dealing with those in adversity?
Mentally, yeah. You definitely, whenever you fight through adversity and come out on the other side, it definitely gives you a feeling of invincibility at times. But obviously, that is not the case. And so it's always a balancing act. And that's what this offseason has been about for me. It's not pushing through some things that I've pushed through in the past. I've always prided myself on my mental toughness to be able to push through pain and push through those injuries. And so that's kind of been my growth this offseason, is taking a step back and understanding my value to the organization and to the team, and the value of the work that I've put in for the last 10 years, and relying on that as opposed to relying on my work week in and week out, day to day.
So there's Joe Burrow from Tuesday, Jay. I mean, again, like I said, this was a lot of similar themes to what we heard a month ago. How did you take? Did you feel like this was sort of an extension of what we heard, or anything else that stood out to you about it?
Yeah, it did feel a little different. Just his tone. He's never been a cliche coach speak kind of guy, but it does sometimes feel like he can be on autopilot in those press conferences. And we didn't necessarily hear it in the clip you just played, but a lot of times, like, he took a beat or two before he answered the question. Like, he really thought about the question and what he wanted to say before saying it. And I mean, it makes sense that, like, how could you not learn from the calf injury? And he tried to push through it, caused more damage. It hurt the team because he wasn't himself for 4 weeks. So I get where he's coming from, and I thought it was refreshing to hear him be so open and honest, and just the quote that went everywhere, the football mortality. I mean, it's something you have to think about when you have this many injuries, and I don't know, if he's dealing with, when he talked about listening to his body, is he dealing with something right now? Is there a little bit of a setback? Is that part of the reason for the day off last week and not throwing as hard as we typically see him throw? I mean, it was noticeable. It wasn't because it was just a light drill. When they were just doing the quarterback throws, he stepped out. Jake Browning came in. Jake Browning was ripping it. And then 7-on-7s, Jake Browning threw two deep balls, and Joe Burrow, like the one even intermediate pass he tried to throw, he floated, and Cam Taylor-Britt broke it up. And so I don't know that he's necessarily in pain right now, but it is noticeable the step back he has taken, especially when minicamp is when you kind of expect things to ramp up a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, we saw plenty in terms of him ripping it over the course of this offseason. That's just, I mean, he was doing that a lot. I think, you heard him reference, not here, but in the full press conference, talking about, look, it's not just always the wrist. You do something, and then there's another part of your body that you that's all part of this process. And I think that's probably more than likely where this is at. Cause I certainly don't get any sense from anything that the wrist is an issue. Like I don't, and that's everyone's main concern. I think everybody's really happy with where that is at. But when you start doing more things, you have other stuff, and you got to always kind of be working and be mindful of that. And that's what he talked about, being mindful of there's no need to push if some small things doesn't feel as good as it normally does, and just push through it. I mean, he mentioned that over and over again. That's in the past. I would just say, I'm fine. I'm going to work harder even. Right. And we saw that with the calf. We've seen it with over and over again with Joe. And so I think that you're talking about a guy showing that maturity here and not being afraid to pull back, and doesn't care what anybody thinks about or says about him doing so. That's a big deal. It was a big deal when he said it before we got started doing all this stuff. And it's a big deal now. I think that you've seen it in terms of action. So with that said, I'll ask you this, Jay, if we're looking at this whole thing as a whole, this offseason program for Joe Burrow as a whole, Joe Burrow's offseason program was what for you?
I would say on target. I don't know. There was early on, I would have gone encouraging the way he was throwing it and moving, and now to see the step back, I think it's all part of the plan, and learning from it. And you talked about it before, where you're worried about it leading to something else, and I almost wonder if the wrist resulted. I mean, I know it happened on a hit, but if that happened due to the calf, because he couldn't really drive off that foot, and maybe he's snapping the wrist more and trying to get more torque and compensating for the calf, and that leads to the wrist. And so I think that's it, on target would be my assessment. It's nothing. It wasn't anything wow, but it looks like he is, and he said he is expecting to be ready for the start of the regular season. And in the end, that's all that really matters. And so if he needs to take a few days off, maybe this even continues into camp where he takes some days off, so be it. The main thing is getting him ready for the start of the season, and there's not been a setback, so that means it's on target.
I'll say what I kind of wrote about today. I think it's everything the Bengals could have wanted. It was a guy who gained perspective, a guy who understood that he needs to tone it down sometimes and understand when to tone it down, and better understood the value that he has to, like he said, the organization, and the value that his health is for everyone, and to start listening to his body and stop listening to his mind, rewiring himself. The guy who's, quote, wired differently, right? That's how he's been described the whole time, to rewire himself to understand that his durability is now number one. Nobody has concern about his ability to have enough arm strength, his ability to make every play, to be an elite quarterback, to take a team to the Super Bowl. Those were questions that existed in his life prior. Everyone questioning that, and that driving him the way he was wired.
Mm-hmm.
Him rewiring himself now to say, I got to keep myself healthy. That is number one. I cannot mess with that. That is the concern of my career right now. That's it. No one has a concern about Joe Burrow other than health, honestly. And if they do, it's because of health. It's somehow like a symptom of that. And so I think showing that understanding, all while doing, like you said, Jay, staying on target, throwing. What else could you have wanted other than say you saw him throw, saw him rip it, saw him scale it back, showed perspective and understanding that he knows the process is, full expectations to be tip-top shape when it comes time to start the regular season, from what the offseason program was and all the uncertainty around this injury and Burrow as a whole. I think this was as good as the Bengals could have expected, maybe better, because I don't know that they were necessarily counting on the full actions of the perspective and everything. So I think it was really good. I think despite the hysteria and literally talking about football mortality, I think that part is a good thing. Burrow's an overthinker. So you want him to be overthinking about that now, instead of overthinking about how do I gain a 0.001% margin on June 2nd.
Yeah, my question now is on October 2nd. Is that perspective top of mind when it comes time to flush from the pocket? Is he going to be actually in the moment more willing to just throw a ball away or try to make plays with his feet, extend plays? You know, it's one thing to do it in the offseason. Are we going to see a change in the way he plays the game?
That is the next stage of this, right?
Yes.
And I think the ascension of Jake Browning helps this. The confidence in Jake Browning helps this.
Sure.
And I think he's referencing in season 2. I think he's referencing the decisions. You know, I bet he cringes listening to his press conference before the Rams game or after the Rams game last year. Now, thinking about, that's the perspective he's talking about. His mind being that this team cannot survive without me risking the entire season almost for this night. We can't afford to go 0-3. No one else can lead them to victory, right? Sitting back and watching Jake Browning do that and have some success maybe help with that perspective and helps him feel better about that risk reward come October, come November. And you still look, he's still going to be that dude. You can only subdue being wired like that so much. He's still going to be that. It's still going to be about the end goal. But I think that's just it. It's about how do I get myself and this team to February. And he referenced that. And I think that's, you know, that perspective is good.
There was a hint of the old Joe in that press conference when he said he's learning how to play piano. And this guy can afford a tutor, but nope, he's going to teach himself. He's going to watch YouTube and do it himself. And he's got a couple songs that he says he could play. And I think it's either part of the rehab process, or if not, it's a good sign. If his wrist was bothering him, he's not playing piano. That would just be undue, I don't know, motion. It's not the same
but
torque.
It's keeping your wrist active.
Yeah.
It's keeping your wrist active. I feel like it's maybe part of rehab. I don't know. I like the idea that he's just really gotten into classical music. You know, he's just really starting to feel it. Likes to sit around and play sad songs on the piano. You know, maybe that's what it is. Just write real sad music about injuries and mortality, football mortality. That's going to be his first big hit. A song that he writes called Football Mortality. It's going to be a real sad one. That's what I'm looking for. Although I cannot get Stu's song from The Hangover out of my head of him playing the piano singing a song about tigers. I just can't. I cannot get it out of my head. You've seen The Hangover, right, Jay?
I have seen The Hangover, but I don't remember the song that you're referencing.
Take a little tiger snooze. You don't remember? I mean, it's amazing. It's like one of the greatest scenes. Oh, I haven't been able to
I was
get out of my head.
hungover when I saw
I
The
need
Hangover.
Joe Burrow singing that song, singing a song about tigers inside of like a Vegas hotel room. I need that in my life. I
think he's
Go
working his
rewatch.
way
I'll
up.
send it to you. I will send it
Okay,
to
yes, do.